we will continue addressing the muscular system of the body. We had addressed the very important group of muscles, which are the muscles of respiration, but when we continue, we are unable to cover any part of the 608 muscles in the body. We are going to address the superficial muscles of the body, and we are going to study some muscles in details and others only naming them and very few information about these muscles. This is our very basic facts in anatomy. Anatomy is visual and descriptive science, and we cannot forget that, because this is the bread and butter of the science of anatomy, and this is a very, very basic fact. One of the basic facts that we should follow in our university life is that we should not study hard, we should study smart. We should use our intelligence in gaining our information, and we should depend less and less on our memory.
What is this? These are 5 question marks. Why am I presenting to you this idea? Because one of the very successful industrious man said, when you ask yourself 5 questions about any problem, you will solve your problem.
We are back to very basics of gaining knowledge, and this is the rule of 5. If you ask yourself 5 questions about anything, then when you do that, you will solve your problems in anatomy, in everything in life. Always ask questions. Minimum is 5 questions, and ask yourself these questions before others ask you, like before the exams ask you, and get answers. And if you do that, you can learn a lot. This is a basic fact of learning, and there are more questions than answers. Muscles are arranged in groups, and we had an idea about the group of muscles of respiration, and these groups, they are there to move joints or other structures, and muscles have the power of pulling. There is no pushing in muscles, and the muscles, when we talk about a particular muscle, it has a main function and may have other minor functions. Remember that muscle action as a force, and any force in physics has directions. This is our bread and butter of learning. and it is the very basics that we should never forget. So don't miss data analysis, discussion, and sharing information. Then the very important question is, what do we need to know in case of studying muscles? This is the answer. To understand muscles, we need to know the synovial joints and their movements. Now let's do business. This muscle you see on your right is the Pectoralis Major. Why pectoralis? Because it is in the pectoral region, and pectoral equals the chest or the thorax. And why major? Because it is large. If there is Pectoralis Major, then there will be Pectoralis Minor. And this muscle comes from the medial half of the clavicle as upper fibers, and the manubrium sterni, then the body of the sternum, and lower down it comes from costal cartilages, and sometimes even from the upper part of the anterior abdominal wall. These fibers, as they converge, because they converge from a wide origin and they are inserted in a short insertion. Now this insertion is in the crest of the greater tubercle. The greater tubercle is part of the upper end, and it is large, and as its lower end goes down the upper part of the shaft of the humerus, it creates an elevation called the crest of the greater tubercle, and the Pectoralis Major attaches there. And please note, as this muscle is attached to the manubrium sterni and the body of the sternum plus the ribs, then this is going to be a good accessory inspiratory muscles. Accessory means it is used when it is needed. It is not used in normal breathing. And what does it do, Pectoralis Major? It flexes and ducts the arm and medially rotates it. We are going to show you these actions, and remember that sometimes even it takes origin from the upper part of the abdominal wall. Here is another image of the Pectoralis Major. Now we know lots of information about its origin or from where it comes. Now if we look into this oval shape, we can see that it is going to be attached to the greater tubercle crest, but there is a twisting of fibers. The upper fibers will insert lower down and lower than the upper fibers. This is a lateral view of the thoracic region, and the muscle here is the Pectoralis Major, and as you can see, it is going to move the shoulder joint and it is going to pull the shoulder joint, and the humerus it's going to pull it anteriorly, and that is flexion of the shoulder joint. It is time to write down our notes of Pectoralis Major. These are facts about its origin, clavicle, sternum, ribs, and this is a piece of information about its insertion on the greater tubercle, and these are the main functions. It flexes, adducts the arm, and medially rotates it, and this is the nerve supply. The basics of our intelligence and the way of thinking is questions and answers. Now, if we look at this muscle here, we can see it is in the pectoral region, and if we imagine where is the Pectoralis Major, it is on top of this muscle. So this muscle is also in the pectoral region, and it is smaller than the muscle we have just seen, and therefore this is Pectoralis Minor, and it comes from 3 ribs. This is rib number 3, and this is rib number 4, and this is rib number 5, and the fibers of the 3 slips of this muscle, they go and attach to the coracoid process of the scapula, and it is not attached to the humerus, therefore it acts on the scapula. This is the same muscle, the Pectoralis Minor. We are going to ask ourselves questions and look for answers. Questions and answers are the bread and butter. That is the basic food of our intelligence. And remember, we need, as university people, to use our intelligence and rely less on our memory. This is number 3 rib, 4 and 5, and then the fibers will go up and insert on the coracoid process of the scapula, and it is under cover of Pectoralis Major, and it is smaller, therefore this is Pectoralis Minor. And what does it do? It draws the scapula forward, it brings it forward and medialward, because it is an oblique muscle, and it is bringing the scapula downwards. And remember, because it is attached to ribs, it can be accessory inspiratory muscles in certain situations. This muscle, the Pectoralis Minor, is coming from these areas, and you know what are these areas, and attaches to the coracoid process. And what does it do? From this view, it acts on the scapula and brings it from the top of the back of the thorax. It brings it downward and medially. So this is the action of Pectoralis Minor. A quick overview of the basic shoulder movements. And when you take your arm away from your body and lift it up, this is flexion. And when you bring it down to the side of the body, this is extension. And when you increase this extension, you are doing overextension or hyperextension. Then we come to this image here, in which you are moving your upper limb away from your body. This is adduction. And next, when you do this movement, that means the arm is at the side of the body, but the forearm is in front of your abdomen. The humerus is moving medially. This is medial rotation, and its anterior part becomes medial. Then when you do this movement, still the arm is at the side of your body, but your forearm and your hand is not on your abdomen but away from your trunk. This is called external rotation, and the humerus axis moves laterally. This is lateral rotation. What is anterior in the humerus in this position becomes lateral. This is another muscle at the shoulder, and it covers, as you can see, the shoulder joint, and it comes from the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle and the spine of the scapula posteriorly, and goes to the deltoid tuberosity. And you know the deltoid tuberosity is the only feature of the shaft of the humerus. This is a lateral view of the deltoid, where you can see it is also attached to the acromion process in addition to the clavicle, and it comes to the deltoid tuberosity. And here you can see that it is triangular in shape, and therefore it is going to hold the name of the deltoid muscle. Questions and answers makes you use your intelligence. Remember that. Because the deltoid takes origin from the lateral part of the clavicle, the red part, the acromion process of the scapula, the green part, which is lateral, and the blue part coming from the spine of the scapula, the posterior part. This means that the deltoid is equal to 3 parts. What are these 3 parts? There is anterior part, lateral part, and medial part. Why should we talk about this? Because each part has its own action in producing movements of the shoulder joint. My question here is, can you find the deltoid? This is a posterior view of the deltoid muscle. Can you identify the part coming from the spine of the scapula, making the posterior 1/3 of the deltoid? And then if you go laterally, can you identify the part of the deltoid coming from the acromion process? My answer hopefully will be that you can. Now, the subject here is the deltoid muscle. The question is, what is the position of the arm? The answer is in a position of abduction, and which is going to produce abduction. This is abduction, being the arm away from the body, and you know which part of the deltoid is going to do the abduction. It is the lateral part, the part coming from the acromion process. The question here is, can you identify the deltoid? Hopefully yes. And what is this movement? Hopefully you can answer this question. Which part of the deltoid is producing this movement? Hopefully by now you should know which part. Let us ask our intelligence, what is this? This is the upper arm is in front of the trunk, and it is going to be raised towards the head. This is away from the trunk, but in a sagittal section. Therefore, this is what? This is flexion. What is this situation? Here we are looking at the back of the trunk, the thorax and the lumbar region, and this muscle is called Latismus Dorsi. It is originating from lower 3 or 4 ribs, the vertebral spine of T7 down to the sacrum, and also the iliac crest is giving origin to this muscle. And where does it go? It goes to the floor of intertubercular groove, and once it is attached to the ribs, although few ribs, and attached to the humerus, fix the humerus and it will move the ribs. Therefore, this is an accessory inspiratory muscle. What does it do? It extends the arm and rotates the arm medially. This is called swimmer's muscle, because when somebody is in the pool and this person is swimming, he puts his arm forward and then pushes it towards the trunk and then extend it to the back. So this is an extensor of the shoulder joint, a very powerful extensor. let's use our intelligence and ask ourselves, what are these four muscles? These four muscles are the following. Here is the supraspinatus. It comes from, as you can see, the supraspinous fossa and inserts on the top of the greater tubercle. This muscle is part of the rotator cuff muscles that pulls the head of the humerus towards the glenoid cavity, and when it contracts, it helps in abduction of the shoulder. Then this muscle is coming from the infraspinous fossa of the scapula and inserts into the lateral part of the greater tubercle of the humerus, and when it contracts, it pulls the head of the humerus towards the glenoid cavity. Therefore, it is part of rotator cuff muscles. Then, in this lower left image, this is an anterior view. We cannot see the spine of the scapula, and this is an anterior view, and there's a muscle, a very powerful muscle, extends from the infraspinous fossa towards the lesser tubercle of the humerus, not the greater tubercle, and this is also a member of the rotator cuff muscles that pulls the head of the humerus towards the glenoid cavity, and in addition to that, it produces adduction. The fourth muscle to your lower right, you can see it is a muscle coming from the lateral border of the scapula, not near the spine but higher up, and inserts on the greater tubercle of the humerus. It is a part of the rotator cuff muscles, and this is called Teres Minor. Teres means what? Teres means when you cut this muscle, the cross section is circular. This is the rule of 5, the rule of asking 5 questions about anything. Then you will have the basics of this anything in life. This is an animated view of these two muscles, and it is a very good exercise. If I don't comment on that, but just go through the animations and you will learn a lot. Questions and answers. Use of intelligence. This muscle is Teres Minor. When you cut this muscle, the cross section is circular, and if it is minor, then there will be Teres Major. It comes from the upper 2/3 of the lateral border of the scapula and inserts here. Where is here? It is the greater tubercle of the humerus, and it is a member of rotator cuff group of muscles. And now you know what is the rotator cuff muscles and what do they do. Here, in addition to the function of the rotator muscle function, in addition to that, it does this. What is this? This is lateral rotation of the arm. Let's use the electric generator of our intelligence and ask questions and look for answers. This can be a question in your exam. What is this muscle? So work your out and find the name of this muscle. This image is presented to you so that you can review your knowledge about these three muscles. Look at this muscle at the back, colored red. Is this a single muscle? No, it is made of two halves, one of the right and one on the left. Each part on the side is triangular in shape. Now we should generate our intelligence with questions and answers. From where is this muscle coming? It comes from the medial third of superior knuckle line. What is superior knuckle line? It is a transverse line on the external surface of occipital bone. Then look at this arrow. This is the external occipital protuberance. What is external occipital protuberance? It is a bony elevation that you can feel at the back of your head on the external surface of the occipital bone. Then as we go lower down, it takes origin from ligamentum nuchae. What is ligamentum nuchae? It is a ligament of the upper part of the neck connecting what? Connecting spinous processes of cervical vertebrae. And then if you look down the back of the thorax, you will find that this muscle is going to be attached to the spinous processes of cervical vertebrae from the prominence of C7 to T12. That is a wide origin, and it is coming to be attached to. Look at this sign, and it indicates the lateral third of the clavicle, and then the acromion process on the medial side, and then the spinous process of the scapula at its upper border. This is a muscle called trapezius. What is trapezius? It's a kind of geometrical shape that has four sides, and the trapezius is a muscle made of two halves. When you add the two halves, it has a trapezoid shape, therefore it is called the trapezius. But one side muscle is triangular in shape, but when you add them they form the trapezius shape. What does it do? The upper fibers will elevate and depress the scapula. It rotates the scapula and it retracts the scapula towards the midline. So we have upper fibers, they elevate the scapula. Lower fibers, they depress the scapula. Middle fibers, they bring the scapulae towards the midline. And this is a skeletal muscle that is supplied by a cranial nerve, and it is the spinal accessory nerve, nerve number 11. This is a back view of the chest and the neck, and at this point of time you are able to recognize the trapezius muscle. When we want to analyze what we see in this image, we need to fuel our intelligence with questions and answers. Questions and answers make us rich in information. Now, this image is divided into two parts. The left part, the trapezius is still in place, and the right part, the trapezius has been removed, because the trapezius is made of two halves, one on the right and one on the left. Why the trapezius has been removed? To expose the muscles underneath it. What is this muscle? This muscle is coming from the neck and attaches to the medial superior angle of the scapula, and when it contracts, it pulls the scapula up, so it deserves what kind of name? It is going to be named according to its function. This is levator scapulae. It elevates the scapula. Then we have these muscles. What is the shape of this group of muscles? It is rhomboid in shape. Therefore, it is called rhomboid muscles. There are two muscles. The upper part is rhomboid major, and the lower part is rhomboid minor. From where are these two muscles coming? They are coming from the vertebral column and run obliquely down to what? To the medial margin of the scapula. And when this group of muscles contract, what do? They take the scapula up and medially. So these are called rhomboids major and rhomboid minor. What is this muscle? This muscle is something you already know, but this image is telling me what? It is telling me that this is the back of the scapula, and this muscle is coming from the supraspinous fossa. Therefore, this is the supraspinatus muscle. What is this muscle here? Next question is, where is it? It is in the infraspinous fossa. Therefore, this is the infraspinatus. What is this muscle? This muscle is at the side of the chest, and it has several lips coming from the ribs, and this is going to be a muscle called serratus anterior. What is this muscle here on the other side of what we were talking about. This muscle is Latissimus Dorsi. Why is it Latissimus Dorsi? Because it is coming from the lower back, even from the sacrum and the iliac crest, and going towards the bicipital groove of the upper end of the humerus. What is this muscle? This muscle is made of several slips, several parts, and this is called serratus posterior. It's time to write notes. Should we write notes? The answer is, well, just to prove to ourselves that we know something. So the shoulder joint muscles. The shoulder joint is the glenohumeral joint, because there is another joint just superior to it, which is what? Which is the acromioclavicular joint. This joint, the glenohumeral joint, has very large, powerful muscles moving it, like muscles that will produce strong movements. Otherwise we cannot do our daily activities with weak muscles. And these large, powerful muscles are the deltoid and the pectoralis major. And now at this point of time we have some knowledge of these muscles, and there are smaller muscles also around the glenohumeral joint, and these are, for example, the rotator cuff muscles. And now you can enumerate and talk about these muscles. They are 4. They help stability of the glenohumeral joint by pulling the head of the humerus towards the glenoid cavity. They are the supraspinatus, subscapularis, infraspinatus, and teres minor. We had good knowledge of these muscles. Then muscles that move the scapula. These include trapezius, we have just talked about, the rhomboids, the levator scapulae, the serratus. This image is talking about a muscle called Teres Major. It is inferior to the Teres Minor, and it is a good exercise for you to analyze this muscle.